It feels to me like there is somebody being forgotten in front of our very eyes, and his name is Nikola Jokic. And look, I know this is where everybody rolls their eyes and say, well, how can you forget him? We talk about him all the time. How can you underappreciate someone while we talk about him? Look at these numbers. Think about this. With 3 games left, he led the league in both reboundings and assists per game. Now, why is that significant? No player in NBA history has ever led both categories. I don't mean in the same season. I mean no player has ever done it. And that's what we're watching happen from Jokic right now. I keep looking at this, Coley, and I'm having this awakening. We spend so much time yelling about LeBron and yelling about SGA, and now we're yelling about Wemby. We love to find these flashy new toys. It is clear right now that the best player in the NBA is Nikola Jokic, and he deserves this love.
He deserves it by all means. I'm right there 100% with you. We talk about points per game, that being the metric in the game these days, a 3-point field goal percentage shooting, that being the metric these days, just because that is what the game has become. But the fact that he is distributing the ball really well, and he's still coming down with the reboards to keep the possessions alive or establish new possessions if it's a defensive board. That is just a credit to his game being so unique and so rare and unlike anything that is happening in the league right now. Something else I noticed is that he currently is ranked 4th on the active list of rebounding per game and also assists per game. He's also ranked 4th in that among active players. That says a lot, because when I look at that list, when I look at all those guys around him in the top 3 and the 5 through 10, those guys are for the most part all guards. And then when you look at the guys rebounding, they're all mostly forwards. You're not going to see a forward who's also getting on that assist list, just like Jokic is doing. The only one it's kind of drawing close to that, and we might have a similar conversation like this maybe in a few years, is Luka Doncic. We'll point out Nikola Jokic is 31, Doncic is 27. So maybe in 4 years' time, we're having a similar conversation about him. But also, Doncic doesn't rebound quite the same way that Jokic does. So I think this is one of those like once in a generational type of moments here. And we do need to start embracing this man's greatness. One other note I'll point out is I was looking on his basketball reference page, Jokic's page, as I was getting ready for this. And I was just curious to know what his Hall of Fame index is, so to speak. It is currently 99.9%. If he were to have his career end today, there's a 99.9% chance he's going to the Hall of Fame. I want to know what he could possibly do on the court that would account for the 0.1% where he doesn't go in the Hall of Fame, because at this point, he's looking like the greatest player of his current era right now.
Look at that stat we have up right now. The only 2 players in NBA history to be in the top 5 for a decade in points, rebound, assists, field goals, and minutes: Oscar Robertson and Nikola Jokic. And what's interesting, too, there's a tweet I saw since the start of 2021. He's 2nd in total points, 2nd in total rebounds, 1st in total assists, 1st in total steals, 3rd in true shooting, and then 1st in win shares, PER, VORP, and BPM. Advanced analytics, normal analytics, all the analytics, he's 1st or 2nd. And I just keep wondering why we don't just embrace the greatness. Even when he's won MVPs, eyes have been rolled at it. And I've been transparent about this in the past when I was doing daily radio for ESPN, and Denver was about to go on their first championship run, and everybody was about to watch them win a title. We win at the time. My radio partner and I went to our bosses and said, hey, should we start covering the Nuggets more? And the answer was no, nobody cares about the Nuggets. I don't know why nobody cares about the Nuggets. Truly, I don't know why in a player-driven league, nobody seems to care about Jokic the same that they care about other superstars. It feels like there's almost an apology. And Coley, at first I thought, well, maybe it's because he's not American and we love American players. But you smartly point out there's a foreign player right now. We're all falling, like you mentioned, Luka, but also Wemby. Like, there are superstars coming from all over the world. Why are we not embracing Jokic the same way that we've embraced Doncic or, I don't know, Wemby? Like, why does he not get that same level of conversation and that same level of showstop and that same level of lead every show with the highlights and that same level of, oh my God, could this guy be the face? Have you ever seen a single conversation about Jokic that involved who should be the face of the NBA? And the answer was ever Jokic, because statistically, he should be.
Yeah, I think the big problem for him is, well, one, playing in Denver, and this is not a knock on the city of Denver or the media market of Denver. It's just not as sexy as Los Angeles, where Doncic is right now. Dallas, which has a massive media market where the beat writers are on top of everything, whether it's Mavs, of course, Cowboys, and Rangers to a degree. So Doncic benefited from that in the Dallas days. And then in Wemby's case, yeah, he's in Texas as well, where there is kind of this oversized following, particularly around the Spurs and their legacy and their history. So I think there's a little bit of that maybe is affecting Jokic in this case. Also, the fact that he's a guy that basically shows up to work, does his job, has these insane numbers, has these great nights, and then, goes away. And then the offseason, he goes back home and we don't really hear from him until all of a sudden it's time to get ready for the season again. So I think there's some of all of that's kind of overlapping here with him. But something else I want to point out is that I was going down this basketball reference rabbit hole yesterday as I was getting ready for this. And I noticed that his similarity scores right now, granted they're a little overinflated because he hasn't quite hit the end of his career where the numbers will start to go down. But right now he is right in the mix with names like Bill Russell, Shaq, even Dwight Howard kind of on the low end. These are all guys who are Hall of Famers, guys who have proven what they can do in this league as being superstars in their own right, but also being such valuable pieces at their positions. The one thing that, at least in the case of Shaq and Bill Russell, that you could argue that Jokic doesn't have is all the championships. Yes, he has the one in 2023, but we haven't seen Jokic in the finals year after year after year. And maybe that's another factor that's kind of playing to his detriment. But again, to your point, Wemby hadn't even been there yet. So I don't know if that just totally ripped away everything that I just said. But I am curious to see how the legacy of Jokic is remembered once we get more closer to the end of his career. Right now, what I say he's a top 10 player of all time. I don't feel comfortable saying that off the top of my head at this moment in time, but top 15, top 20, I think you have a very, very strong case. And again, maybe at the end of his career, we do have a moment where we can say, yeah, he's right there in the mix with the likes of the Wilts and the Oscar Robertsons and the Magic Johnsons and these guys that we have lauded for decades and put in that top 10 conversation.
I mean, the funny thing is, you and I share a similar visceral reaction. When somebody says top 10 player of all time, I'm like, come on, right? Like, that's the first thing we all say. And then, because as I've said on this show, so I want to be consistent, because on this show, I've said in the past when we say, well, top 10 player of all time, there's certain spots in that top 10 that are so galvanized that it's almost impossible to work your way in there for modern players, right? Because LeBron and Michael and Kobe and Kareem and Magic and Shaq, you mentioned. I mean, it's pretty easy to find the top 7 or 8 that without any discourse or disagreement from anybody that are just cement, right? They're in these things in stone. But I do start looking around and saying, are we 100% sure? And I know this is going to offend a lot of old guys. I am an old guy. Are we 100% sure that Bill Russell, who was obviously playing against a much different level of NBA, is better than Jokic? Like, I realize it's apples and oranges because they're different eras of basketball. That's one of the difficult things here. But are we really 100% sure that what Jokic is doing right now isn't more freakish than what we've seen from some of the icons we talk about in the past? Like, I get that Wilt was Wilt, and we're not allowed to question Wilt, even though most of us have never seen a damn minute of Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain other than what you see on YouTube, which is almost impossible to have context to. But we're not allowed to question these things. Should we? I mean, even, like, I know, God forbid we mention Shaq, but let's all remember, Shaq was a physical presence that nobody could stop, right? And it was the most incredible thing in the world, to the point that you just fouled him because you knew that he was a one-trick pony that did one thing so well, you could never stop it. I respect that. But isn't Jokic the opposite of that? Like, he's leading in every category we could possibly. I almost dropped a swear word there. I was so passionate about it. He's leading in every category you can possibly imagine. And we're not allowed to have him in the same conversation as Shaq. Shaq did one thing. Like, and Shaq had God-given size that he used for one thing. And then, I mean, my God, are we allowed to just say Larry Bird and wonder? Like, I do think, like, maybe it's time for us to recalibrate. Like, there's this aw shucks thing about Jokic that just doesn't hit people the same way. We don't think of Jokic as having this killer instinct, which is almost scarier, Coley, Because if he's dominating the league in every possible category, has a championship,
Silent.
has multiple MVPs, and he doesn't have killer instinct, what does that say about his ability? Like, I don't know. I'm getting closer and closer to feeling like maybe the argument is, at this point, Jokic is a top 10 player, because clearly right now, the best player in the NBA, not just this year, but the best player of his generation right now happening in the NBA is Nikola Jokic. You cannot be as dominant in every single category. And I don't care if it's not flashy. I don't care if it's not sexy. I don't care if it's not as much fun to watch. I don't care if we want to look at it and say, well, he's just a big, lumbering, doofy-looking white dude. Like, I don't care about any of that. Like, at some point, the numbers are the numbers. The dominance is the dominance. The MVPs are the MVPs. I just think maybe he belongs in a much different tier, even though we're gently trying to put him there.
I think part of it also is the fact that we don't value enough of what the league has become around him. And this is kind of the point that you were making with, what was the league with Bill Russell in terms of who he was playing against? Doncic is playing against the best of the best of the best. The league was certainly in a far different state in the 60s as the integration of the sport was just really beginning to take on. So there were times when Russell wasn't having to face 6'8", 7'5" guys in the post nonstop and 6'8" guys who could guard him on the wing. He wasn't seeing that same size and length that you see from a lot of the players in today's game. But that being also said, I still just don't think that we could diminish greatness that way as well. I mean, all the championships, all the rings that Bill Russell has, he's in that conversation for a reason. And I think that is really one of the big factors that is going against Jokic right now, is just he hasn't been on a team that's really, really won other than the one championship. Say if we put him all of a sudden on the Celtics and they've got 3 rings right now as opposed to the one that he currently has, maybe that changes a conversation and he is the face of the game. But I just also think that there are so many other players who have become the face, so to speak, of this game at this moment. American players and even foreign-born players in the case of Wemby and Doncic, that that Jokic has just gotten lost in the shuffle. And I think that he personally, if I were him, I think that he actually enjoys this, embraces being that silent assassin, so to speak, goes out, gets his buckets, gets his rebounds and assists every night, and then just walks away, and that's that. I think that's just the way that he is. He's wired.
Which is probably part of why in the conversation of his greatness at times he's forgotten, because we love celebrity, and celebrity doesn't seem to be something that Jokic is particularly interested in, because frankly, you're right. Everything you said, if he won 4, 5, 6, 7 championships, we talk about him differently. Well, to your point earlier, how many chips does Doncic have right now? How many chips does Wemby have right now? In fact,
exactly.
Jokic has the same number of rings as Giannis. And we talk a hell of a lot more about Giannis than we'll ever talk about Jokic. And let's be clear here. Nikola Jokic is a better basketball player than Giannis Antetokounmpo. And it ain't even close. Like, it's not, they're not in the same. You walk into the bar and you say, I want top tier of vodka. They're not on the same shelf. Like, Giannis Antetokounmpo's career and Nikola Jokic's career are not on the same shelf. And we talk about Giannis all the time. So both of them have the same number of rings. They both got 1. And we're sitting here constantly saying, oh my God, the Bucks have failed Giannis. Why haven't they done more? Giannis should have been bigger. Everything should be greater. We don't do that with Jokic. So it's just all of it. The different treatment is so funny to me, because my God, we are ready, willing and able to sit here and tell the world that Wemby is about to be the guy. I'm not even sure we can say right now that Wemby's going to win this year in the playoffs, when inevitably, hopefully, he has to take on Jokic, who we just saw a few nights, floated right over all 7,033 feet of Wemby's wingspan. Right. So this show is going to give more credit to Jokic. That is 100% sure.